Hey everyone. So we just ended a tutorial that talked about scripting, and I talked a little bit about how scripting can be important for a composer or a sound designer in a game development environment because you bring more skills to the table. And when you bring more skills to the table, it means that you're able to help them out and take some of the load off their programmers and things like that. It's not mandatory, but it can maybe help you get the job over someone else if you know a little bit about scripting. We're teaching just the very basics of scripting in this class as it pertains to C Sharp, and there's not a lot to it, but I think it's important for you to at least have an understanding of how that works. In this tutorial, I'm going to go over some additional aspects of programming to kind of clarify some of the things that we're talking about in the other one. So if I look at that script and kind of step through it, I can kind of, I've been working in programming for a little while, actually a long while, but I don't consider myself a programmer, but I can look at code and sort of understand it. And we're going to kind of create our own code after analyzing what this is here. So at the very top, what it's doing is it brings in kind of like a plugin. This is like it's called a namespace. And this is a collection of classes. It's basically like bringing a bunch of experts into your code that has, or a bunch of scripts that have been pre-written so you don't have to start from scratch. And that's what that's for. And I'll demonstrate this kind of, if we want to create a class called cars, like we're creating a game, that is all that has cars in it, right? One of the things I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to bring in some experts to build these cars. And so I might bring in, for instance, and I'm kind of I'm just kind of creating an example script here. So using, we'll have to bring in a mechanic, right? And we'll have to bring in some engineers, and we'll have to bring in some other people. Let's see, we may have to bring in a programmer. And each one of those brings in various expertises, right? Maybe a designer instead of a programmer would probably be more apropos. All right, so after every individual line of code, you have to put a semicolon at the end. So that's kind of why I'm doing that. Now, in order to create my car, I have to create what's called a class. And what a class is kind of a blueprint describing all the things that a car can do, or what an object can do in the game. So if I continue, what I want to do is create a class. And the way that I do that is, first of all, I want to make it accessible to all the other scripts. And so I use this keyword called public. And public means that all the rest of my scripts can access this car class to bring it up, whether it's level 1 or level 2 or things like that. So I'll create a public class, and if I go look at my other script, I can see public class, and then I have the class itself, and then what it's part of, and I'll kind of get to this in a minute. So public, and then I'll go class, and to define the class, and then I'll call it automobile. And then I have to specify what class it comes from. And so I'm just going to say it comes from the object class. Don't worry so much about this. This means that it may inherit a bunch of other properties from other scripts. What that means is that we can extend classes, or we can extend the functionality. So when we create, for instance, over in this other script, this new behavior script, we're actually taking that from mono behavior. Mono behavior is specific to, it brings in a bunch of different things, including the fact that we can use this start and update these various functions because it's part of mono behavior. Now, we're kind of creating one from scratch and kind of almost in a fake way, but we'll just import it like that. I need the bracket here to basically encapsulate my public class, and then I sort of say, all right, that's the end of my class. And you can see that this bracket corresponds to this bracket up here, and it highlighted it. And then inside the automobile class that I create, I can create some variables. Now, again, don't be too worried about this for now. What we're trying to do is I'm trying to simplify what a class is and how this stuff works in a game. And the more you see it, the better off you're going to be. But at first, it's going to look really complicated. But all I'm doing is kind of saying, all right, well, I need all these experts or these plugins. I need a mechanic, an engineer, a designer. And then I'm making a class. And a class is that blueprint of what the automobile is going to do. And so within that blueprint, I have to give the car some variables. And so I'll create a variable called, one of the first ones I'll do is color, right? Because the automobile needs a color, so I'll say color. And then, so the variable color, and then I'll call it the car's color. Now, the first word variable basically instructs the computer to say, all right, well, I need to set aside some memory for this. Like I need some like brain space for this. And then color tells us what type of brain space I need. And then the one after that is my variable name. So I call it the car's color. And I actually can put equals red over here if I wanted to. And then I go to the next line, and now I need another variable, and let's call it horsepower. I'll just call it HP, right, for horsepower, or Hewlett-Packard. Anyways, horsepower, and then I'll say the car's horsepower equals 500, right? And I can create various variables that apply specifically to the car. Then I need what are called functions, and what a function basically does is it's something that the automobile can do or the object can do. For instance, the car can start. And actually, if we go back over to our other script that we have here, we have this variable right here. And I'll show you what a function looks like. So a function takes looks like this. We have to start it with a keyword, and I'm going to start it with void because it's not going to return anything. That's an advanced concept which we'll get into maybe later in the class, or not at all. It's not super important that you need to know this. So void start will be our script, and we have to use 2 parentheses. This is just how it's formatted. And then similarly, we have to put a bracket to start that section and another bracket to sort of end it. And this is called a function. So this function here is part of the automobile class. So when we bring it up, we're able to start the car. We also need other functions, like we need to go forward. And so I create a function called forward and another one called stop. And I'm just creating these functions. And then within start, it's like, then we have to call some commands, which might be another function. For instance, we're defining a function here, but we can call other functions. Like within start, we can say, all right, turnkey, and that will be a function. And down here, I'll have another function called turnkey, like that, where I'd be more specific, like, you know, I'd call another thing that would say, you know, put the key into the ignition, turn the ignition, fire the motor, the starter motor, which spins the motor itself to get the spark plugs running, put gas in. So when I start the car, you know, we turn the key, and then turning the key may call a bunch of other functions, like which is what I was saying, like trigger the battery, then turn the motor, turn the starter motor, and which would then, you know, fire the pistons and the spark plugs. If you're into cars, I may be totally messing this up, but I think you guys get the idea that once I turn the key, and then it's going to fire all these other functions. And in Unity, there's a bunch of built-in functions. Um, so just a couple of more topics, just to hopefully not confuse you anymore. I want to talk about comments, because comments are really important. Whenever I put two slashes at the beginning of a line, it's going to ignore that. So I can put notes in here. Notes go here. And I can put them anywhere that I want to. So I could put notes in here too, with just two slashes at the front. Help me remember this. There's also a way, these are called comments. There's also a way to comment out an entire section of code if you want. I'm not going to show that today, but basically this gives you an idea of how code works a little bit. So when I go back to this script, I can say, all right, it's importing all these expert plugins so that I can use the Unity engine and all the different functions that come along with that. And all the functions of system collections, that's mostly for memory, and then all the functions of Unity audio. Then I create my class. Then I have a couple variables. These are two variables, the audio mixer snapshot and the fade time. Then I have a few things that are built into Unity, like the start command. This function here happens when the game starts up, and this script is applied to an object within the scene. Update is called every frame, so every frame refresh, which can be important for larger games in terms of figuring out, oh, has the enemy died, or have you started running, those kinds of things. That's basically a check that happens every time the game draws a new frame. And then here are a couple comments that I wrote in, right? And then on trigger enter, again, on trigger enter is something that gets pulled in from, it's a function that gets pulled in when I bring this Unity engine in that applies to when I actually bump into an object in the 3D world itself. And then here's another function, debug log, that actually prints out to our little console window. And then this is where we specify our variable, and that variable calls this function transition, right? So our variable was that snapshot, and basically we're transitioning to that snapshot over a specific fade time. Anyways, I hope that helps out a little bit in terms of clarifying the coding. Again, I'm not trying to make you a coding expert, but it's kind of useful to know this stuff in case you want to get into it later. Anyways, good luck. Thanks.